resource-rich corners of the country. And for Gaston County native Jamie Fraley, 2008 is shaping up to be the best year of her life. Standing at only 4'9", Jamie seems poised to get everything she's ever wanted.
Jamie was a very small, petite girl, but her personality was like a piece of dynamite.
The diminutive 22-year-old is living on her own and studying to pursue a career she is passionate about.
Jamie wanted to help people that were on drugs, and she thought that she could save the world.
Even better, Jamie has met the boy of her dreams, Ricky Simons Jr.
Jamie loved Ricky so much. Jamie was just Ricky Dale crazy. I mean, she was just head over heels in love with him.
She even refers to herself as Mrs. Simons on her MySpace page.
She was in love and she was very happy. She never let me even think that something was wrong in her life. I just would have never thought that.
But life hadn't always been so happy for Jamie.
Jamie had health issues from the time that she was born. I had a really hard time bringing her into the world, and we both almost died.
Jamie was actually clinically dead when she was born. They had to do CPR on her. Then they said Jamie wouldn't live, and then she made it a year. Then they said she wouldn't make it to 3, and she just beat the odds. She was a miracle.
As she got older, Jamie continued to surpass the doctor's expectations, but she still struggled with health and developmental issues associated with her difficult birth.
She couldn't gain weight for a long time.
She was frail and dependent.
Then, when she turned 18, Jamie was diagnosed as bipolar.
She really didn't take it seriously. She wasn't taking her medicine. She took it at first, and then she told me that it made her feel funny. She wasn't taking it anymore.
Bipolar disorder, along with her other health issues, made it difficult for Jamie to pass her driver's license test. And so she felt she had no choice but to live at home with her mother.
Jamie depended on me for everything because, she had had so many issues in her life.
But as she got older, Jamie longed for independence. And when she turns 21, she sets out to get it.
When she got older and she was on Social Security supplementary income, Jamie was assigned a provider to help her with her bills, show her how to keep her bank account, take her to where she needed to go, to her doctor's appointments.
And it was hard for us, the whole family, to let her go and try to make it on her own.
Having never finished high school, Jamie enrolls in nearby Gaston College to study for her GED and start planning her future.
She had really came a long way. She was thriving, and she just seemed like she was really going down a good path.
She was doing great. She was just doing her everyday life. She was involved in church real heavy.
It's while attending church that Jamie discovers what she wants to do with her life.
There was a program there on Friday nights for addiction. Jamie had a friend that had gotten bad into drugs. It was someone that we knew since Jamie was a little girl. Jamie got close to her because she wanted to help her to get off drugs. That's where that started. And then she started going to the church, getting an idea of how it works.
By 2007, everything in Jamie's life seems to be on track. And just when it looks like things can't get any better, she meets Ricky Dale Simons Jr.
She had got in an altercation with someone, and Ricky Jr. came to her defense.
And he stepped in and saved her, so that to her, well, he's my hero.
The son of her apartment building's maintenance man, Ricky Jr. seems just as crazy about Jamie as she is about him.
Jamie called me and told me she had a new boyfriend, and, that they were planning on getting married.
Jamie sounded very happy at the time when she told me about her getting married. I was happy for her.
Jamie was just ecstatic over Ricky. I've not ever heard her speak of anyone else in that way.
But in early January 2007, Ricky is convicted of felony larceny. Because of a lengthy record of previous larceny charges, Ricky is sent away to prison for 15 months.
She'd said that he was in jail, and it really bothered me and disturbed me. And I asked her, I said, Jamie, you really want to think about this? You don't want to jump into this.
Ricky Jr. does have drug issues. If you go back and look at Ricky Jr. criminal record, possession of stolen goods, larceny, things like that, could use to buy the drugs with, that's their problem.
Despite her family's reservations, Jamie is resolute in her love for Ricky.
Nothing you could say or do to stop her. Don't say anything bad about him.
She wrote him every day for 15 months straight, every single day. And every time I visit her, she'll be writing, and she has thousands and thousands of pieces of paper, scattered everywhere. Because she wants to be perfect, to send Ricky in jail.
Jamie spends most of the time waiting for Ricky Jr.'s return with his father, Rick Sr., and his girlfriend, Kim Sprenger.
When they were living all at the apartment complex, they were very close. They hung out a lot together. Jamie went over to the apartment a lot, and they would cook together.
Jamie mentioned that he would just take her places. It was Ricky Jr.'s father, and it was one day going to be her father-in-law. He looked after Jamie somewhat. He would run her to the store. Jamie did not have a driver's license. He would be there for her if she called him.
She came dependent on Rick when Rick Jr. was locked up. She came very dependent on him.
On the morning of April 8th, 2008, Jamie wakes up with a terrible stomachache. As the morning progresses, the pain in her stomach intensifies, and she calls her provider to drive her to the ER. At the hospital, she is diagnosed with the flu and sent home.
Jamie called me on April the 8th. I was at my sister's house. I talked to her. She said she wasn't feeling well, that they had gave her some medication at the hospital. Jamie sounded like she was kind of frustrated. She thought the hospital had gave her the wrong diagnosis.
Jamie spends the rest of the day in bed, but her stomachache only gets worse. Despite feeling so sick, Jamie still fulfills her commitment to take care of Kim Sprenger's dog. Kim has recently split up with Rick Sr.
Kim would bring her dog over for Jamie to babysit.
When Kim arrives in the early afternoon to pick up the dog, she finds Jamie sick in bed. After taking some time to make her more comfortable, she offers to drop off Jamie's prescription at the drugstore. Jamie never picks up the medication. And by the time night falls, Jamie is so sick, she decides she needs to go back to the hospital.
She had Rick to take her back to the hospital, and Jamie was impatient, and there was like a 3 or 4 hour wait, and so she decided she wasn't going to wait.
But when she calls Rick Sr. to pick her up, he does not answer his cell phone, so Jamie has to get another friend to bring her home.
I called her. I'm wanting to say it was close to midnight. She said that she had been throwing up, and she told me that, she kind of had the chills.
Jamie's mother offers to pick her up and bring her to her house an hour away. But Jamie is determined to keep an appointment she had the following morning, close to her apartment.
She said, no, I don't want to come spend the night over there because I have an appointment in the morning with the Social Security office that I can't miss. And, we're like, well, call us, if you need us. And, I love you. Bye. Not the last time I spoke to her.
After hanging up with her mother, Jamie continues to call friends and write emails, including a quick note to her friend Linda's son.
He was in Iraq at the time, and he just described to me that, she wanted to know how he was doing. There was nothing in that email that would give him a hint that anything was wrong at all.
This is the last email Jamie sends before she disappears. Coming up, an ominous call from Jamie's provider sends her family into a panic.
Her provider calls me and says, can't get her to the door and I can't get her on the phone.
With health issues, 22-year-old Jamie Fraley seemed to be on her way to having it all. Love, independence, and a career she was passionate about. But on April 8th, 2008, she comes down with a horrible stomachache that sends her to the hospital twice.
Jamie was sick, but I believe she thought she would be better in the morning, and she wanted to make sure she made that appointment.
The appointment at the Social Security office represented another milestone in Jamie's progress.
Jamie's appointment for the Social Security was to see if money could be turned over to her, seeing that she was trying the independent living and that she could handle her own money.
When Jamie's family doesn't hear from her the morning of her appointment, they assume she's feeling better.
The next morning, I'm thinking Jamie's at the Social Security office.
We did not call Jamie the next day. It wasn't unusual to go a little while without talking to her.
On the morning of April 10th, Jamie's mother receives a troubling call.
Her provider, who was supposed to pick her up for her appointment, calls me and says, I went to pick Jamie up for her appointment yesterday, and I couldn't get her to the door and I can't get her on the phone. She waited a whole day to tell me this.
According to the provider, she had knocked repeatedly on Jamie's door, and after failing to get a response, eventually left.
She's like, well, what do you want me to do? I said, we're gonna call the police. Because she's been sick, we're thinking, she can't get up or be hurt. She is bipolar. She's been sick.
The police send an officer to Jamie's apartment to do a welfare check and make sure Jamie isn't hurt.
We were contacted by Jamie's mother, Kim Fraley, advised that she hadn't spoken to Jamie possibly 2 days. Patrol units went out to her residence and checked her apartment. Did not see anything that seemed out of the ordinary.
Police make note of her bipolar disorder, but surmise that Jamie just stepped out for a bit and will show up later.
There was no sign of forced entry or anything, leaving individuals to believe that wherever she had gone willingly, and there was no signs of a struggle or anything that would indicate otherwise.
But despite the officer's claims that nothing looks amiss, Jamie's mother, aunt, and cousin decide to head to the apartment and look around for themselves.
We went to the apartment. The apartment was locked, but her house keys and purse were still sitting in the apartment. She had a habit of going outside, sticking her cell phone in her back pocket. If it was just to go over to the neighbors, something like that. If she was just going somewhere shortly, but it was unusual.
Next, the women make their way to the bedroom.
You knew that she had been sick on her stomach. It was everywhere.
After seeing just how sick Jamie was that night, her mother is even more alarmed by Jamie's absence.
I don't see Jamie walking in the middle of the night by herself, sick and throwing up. No, I don't see it.
And there are a few other subtle clues in the apartment that reinforce her mother's feeling that something isn't right.
At the top of her stairs, there was no shoelaces in shoes. And it seemed really, really weird. That was the shoes Jamie always wears, besides her flip-flops. Never known her to not wear laces in her shoes.
The women immediately call the police back.
We were contacted again by Jamie's family at that time. Patrol units went back out to the residence, checked her apartment again with her aunt. It didn't suggest that anything of foul play or foul nature took place.
They told us that she was an adult, she could go missing if she wanted to, and that she would probably return home.
While the police are searching the apartment, the women wait in the parking lot and continue to call Jamie's cell phone.
We tried to call her, but I didn't get an answer.
But finally, someone picks up. Unfortunately, the voice on the other end isn't Jamie's.
And a man answered it, and we're like, who are you, and why do you have her phone?
Coming up, investigators discover Jamie was keeping a secret.
What really got me was that Jamie knew and did not tell us.
Seen or heard from in 2 days. While the petite 22-year-old's apartment doesn't display any overt signs of foul play, her family is sure that something has happened to Jamie.
The day we went into Jamie's apartment and saw her pocketbook and keys, I knew something was wrong.
Her family has repeatedly tried to call her cell phone, with no luck. But on April 10th, 2008, someone finally picks up.
We kept calling her phone, and a man answered it. It's like, well, I'm the cable man. I was over here working on the cable lines, and I heard his phone ringing down on the ground, and I just picked it up. When I heard that, it's like you automatically know something's not right, and I just fell down into the parking lot and started screaming.
An officer is immediately sent out to recover the phone.
The phone was found in the roadway, the north-south lane off of South New Hope. It was found in the middle of the roadway, scuffed up.
By all accounts, Jamie was never without her cell phone.
First thing I thought when her phone was found on the side of the road, it's like, that ain't Jamie. At one time, she did have 2 house phones and 2 cell phones, just so little Rick can call her from prison. That ain't like Jamie.
Speaking with family and friends, Jamie always had her cell phone with her, so it led us to believe that either she lost the phone, tossed the phone, or someone might have tossed the phone that was not Jamie.
3 days after Jamie is last seen, police conduct a full-scale search of the wooded area where Jamie's phone was found.
The area around the phone was searched multiple times. Canines have been used. Areas around the apartment complex have been searched, as well as bodies of water.
There was no trace of Jamie anywhere besides just her phone.
Officers also questioned neighbors to see if they had noticed anything wrong in the days leading up to her disappearance.
They gave me a general overview of Jamie, that she's a nice person, lived alone, that she didn't drive, that she required a ride when she went to go to places. We actually spoke to a neighbor who advised that they saw her walk into her residence around midnight, and that was the last person we have found to say that they saw Jamie alive. There's nothing that we've collected from friends, family, and neighbors that would suggest that anything else was wrong that night.
One thing everyone comments on is that Rick Simon Sr. and Jamie spent a lot of time together.
Well, according to the investigation, they were quite friendly. They lived 2 doors down from each other. She was dating Mr. Simon Sr.'s son, who was incarcerated at the time. And so the family connection was fairly obvious.
People said that Rick Simon Sr. helped Jamie a good bit with rides and things of that nature.
Investigators immediately ask Rick Sr. to come to the station for an interview.
In my conversation with Rick Sr., found him to be very cold, manipulative, didn't give much information, was cooperative in talking with us.
When he does a routine background check, Detective Bloom discovers that Rick Sr. has a violent criminal past.
Rick Sr. was an individual that's gotten in some trouble with the law through drug use, petty crimes. He was also charged with murder of a girlfriend years previous.
After serving just 6 years on a manslaughter conviction for strangling his ex-girlfriend to death, Rick Sr. had been released from prison for good behavior. But even after he gets out, he continues to be a regular presence at the police station.
Ricky Simon Sr. did have a long history of drug use and crimes such as larceny, burglaries, petty theft, that sort of thing. Drugs did have a large impact on his life, so he sought them out on a regular basis, and in order to support that type of activity, he had to be involved in some criminal activity.
I was surprised when I found out about Ricky Sr.'s background. I just wasn't aware of his drug use or his criminal background at all.
While her family may have been surprised, it appears that Jamie knew about Rick Sr.'s past.
About 8 and 9 months before Jamie disappeared is when I found out about Rick Sr. killing someone, about his past. And I didn't know whether to believe her or I just didn't know what to say to her. She seemed like she didn't want to believe it. Like she didn't believe it herself. She still put all this trust into Big Rick and, depended on him so much.
And I know why Jamie didn't tell us, because that was Ricky Jr.'s father. Jamie gave everybody the benefit of the doubt. You know, everybody can change. You know, that was her way of thinking.
And Rick Sr.'s past wasn't the only thing Jamie was keeping from her family. She was also not telling them everything about his present situation.
I say it was months before Jamie disappeared. Kim and Rick's relationship started falling apart.
She had moved out. They had a volatile relationship.
And according to reports, the breakdown of Rick Sr. and Kim Sprenger's relationship may have had a lot to do with Jamie.
She would come home from work, and Jamie would be in the house alone with Rick Sr.
Coming up, was Rick Sr. getting too close to his son's girlfriend?
His obsession with Jamie, it didn't seem fatherly. It was more sexually, in his mind.
Heard from in days.
We've determined that no financial activity has occurred since Jamie went missing on any of her credit and her financial resources. It does raise the level of concern in an investigation such as this as to Jamie's status.
Detectives scrambled to find a reason for the frail young woman's disappearance. Interviews with neighbors at Jamie's apartment complex point detectives in an unexpected direction.
During the course of the investigation, collected statements that Rick Simon Sr. said things about Jamie and to Jamie that were more of a sexual nature that showed that he had an interest in her.
It seems Jamie Fraley may have played a central role in the demise of her future father-in-law's relationship with his girlfriend, Kim Sprenger.
When I was around Jamie and Rick Sr. both, I could tell like he was obsessed with Jamie. Rick Sr. is paying more attention to his daughter-in-law than he is his girlfriend.
Ms. Springer did explain to us that that was an issue during her relationship with Simon Sr. And she explained that to Rick. Ms. Springer said that that was a problem.
Rick Sr. had met Kim Sprenger when her husband, a wealthy architect, had hired him to do some maintenance work for their home design business. Their connection intensified, and 2 years later, Kim walked out on her husband and 3 children to move in with Rick in the apartment next door to Jamie's.
He was an intelligent man. As far as animal magnetism that women felt towards him, in speaking with people who had, females that had dealings with him, it was something that was unexplainable. But he did have that ability and that control over women.
And there is a darker bond tying Kim Sprenger to Rick Sr.
Both Rick Sr. and Kim Sprenger were addicts.
Jamie tries to help Rick Sr. and Kim overcome their addiction.
You should tell him. You're hurting yourself. How can you do this to yourself? You're putting yourself down. You're hurting your body. They were ignored all the time.
But Jamie doesn't give up trying to rehab the couple, and is a regular presence at Rick Sr. and Kim's house. According to investigators, after his son is sent to prison, Rick Sr. begins to act inappropriately toward Jamie.
Rick Sr., he would just make these jokes around me and Jamie that it would give me this weird vibe off of him. Just like really perverted jokes. He would comment on, what she was wearing, how short her shorts were, how low her top was. But he would comment it as if he liked it, I'm pretty sure that he probably made moves on Jamie when Junior left.
He commented on some comments that he might have made that may have been uncomfortable. His relationship with his son wasn't the best relationship in the world. They did not see eye to eye on many occasions.
Then, in late 2007, 6 months before Jamie disappears, Kim decides to end the relationship.
Rumors and allegations did play some role, but I believe it was her drug use also that played a major role in their separation. Kim had told the police that she was trying to recover from her addiction, and Rick Sr. was not at that point in his life where he wanted to stop doing drugs.
According to family members, once Kim Sprenger moves out, Rick Sr. pays Jamie more attention than ever.
Jamie, just laugh at his jokes, put it off like it didn't bother her. But if you looked into her eyes, you can tell. I think she felt like I can handle him, you know.
3 days after Jamie disappears, as detectives discover the complexity of her relationship with Rick Sr., the results of her cell phone analysis return. Jamie's cell phone was handled by too many people to lift any viable prints, but phone records showed that the last time anyone spoke to Jamie was around midnight on April 8th.
During one of her last phone calls, she spoke to a friend in Albemarle. That friend in Albemarle said that Jamie was being picked up by someone in a truck. And from there, that was the last conversation that we know of.
Rick Sr. had already confirmed that he had taken Jamie to the hospital once that day. Police wonder, could he have been the ride Jamie spoke of?
Rick Sr. actually drove a white panel van that can be referred to as a truck.
Police speculate that if Rick Sr. gave Jamie a ride that night, then he would have been the last person to see her before she disappeared. Then, detectives get a call about a strange roadside discovery close to Jamie's apartment complex.
During the investigation, we had a phone call about a bag of trash that was located approximately 2.5 miles from Jamie Fraley's apartment complex. Patrol officers responded to that scene. During the investigation, identified that trash bag as belonging to Ricky Simons Sr.
Mr. Simons advised that he had a flat tire, and he removed the trash in order to get to his spare. I definitely thought it was odd.
The bag is located 1.5 miles from where Jamie's cell phone was discarded.
If you connected the cell phone, the bag of trash, and the apartment complex, you would have a perfect triangle almost. It indicates the mode of travel or path of travel that Mr. Simons Sr. may have been taking.
Detectives aren't quite sure what to make of the trash bag. But as they gather more information, it seems increasingly clear to investigators that Rick Sr. had something to do with Jamie's disappearance.
Mr. Simons Sr. was probably the strongest person of interest at this point of the investigation.
When the police said Rick was the main person of interest in the case, I was confused about it because I didn't want to believe that, because I knew that they were supposedly friends. I mean, he spends so much time with her, you know, and they're close, and why would he want to hurt her? I could not fathom a reason of why he would want to hurt her.
When Rick Jr. gets out of prison 3 weeks after Jamie goes missing, he is devastated.
Ricky Jr. responded to Jamie's disappearance hard. He had no family member to go pick him up. So me and my sister and my brother-in-law went and picked him up and took him in. He was out daily looking for Jamie. I believe Ricky Jr. was serious about marrying Jamie.
He is furious to learn his father is the main person of interest in the disappearance of the girl he loves.
When Ricky Jr. found out that his father was the main person of interest, he was extremely angry at his father. He cooperated with the police and whatever they needed to know about his father. After Jamie went missing, he argued with his father constantly. Rick Sr. and Ricky Jr.'s relationship was bad.
While Rick Sr. is cooperative and comes in for an official interview, detectives are not convinced he's telling them everything. They have probable cause to obtain a warrant that allows them to track Rick Sr.'s movements.
A search warrant was issued and granted for Ricky Dillon Sr.'s vehicle to be tracked. It was tracked for, I believe, about a month. From there, we went back and checked the locations where Mr. Simons visited and searched those areas.
Detectives hope that if they follow Rick Sr., he will somehow lead them to Jamie. Instead, they find what they think is a disturbing pattern to his movements.
During the time that we were tracking Rick Sr.'s vehicle, he was in areas near Kim Springer's residence. It appeared that he was following Miss Springer, stalking her, if you will.
Police immediately notify Kim Springer that her ex-boyfriend Rick Sr. is stalking her.
She was advised to take out a restraining order against him.
He was known to have broken into her vehicle.
The day after the police warn her Rick Sr. is watching her, Kim Springer files a restraining order.
First thing I thought, I was like, you know, he probably did have something to do with this, and Kim knows something. And he's probably gonna kill her. That's what came to my mind.
Coming up, a horrifying discovery turns the investigation on its head.
I did not see anything.
22-year-old North Carolina native Jamie Fraley has been missing for nearly 2 months. Investigators think Ricky Dale Simons Sr., the father of Jamie's boyfriend, may have had something to do with her disappearance and have him under surveillance.
We were able to identify Ricky Simons Sr.'s travels, and through identifying those areas of travel and methods of travel and where he frequented, helped us lead us to areas of interest when it comes to Jamie's disappearance.
But police are alarmed when they discover what they believe to be an ominous pattern to the places he frequents.
Ricky Simons Sr. had been stalking Kim Springer.
They warn Kim Springer, who obtains a restraining order against Rick Sr. A month after taking out the restraining order, Kim is running errands when she notices a strange smell wafting through the car.
Miss Springer did notice something unusual smell in her vehicle, but wasn't able to pinpoint what that was.
Throughout the weekend, Kim is bothered by the smell. But it isn't until Sunday afternoon that she thinks to look in the trunk. She screams in horror when she realizes the source of the smell. It's Rick Sr.'s decomposing body.
We were advised that Mr. Simons was found in the trunk area of Miss Springer's vehicle.
When I found out about Rick Sr.'s death, I just went into total shock. I just started squalling. I was devastated. I wasn't devastated because of what happened to him. I was devastated because if he had any answers, I knew right then we would never know.
Police speculate that Rick Sr., Kim's ex-boyfriend, had been dead in the trunk for nearly 2 days before he was discovered.
Ricky Simons Sr. was determined to have died by hyperthermia, basically heat exhaustion or overheated in the trunk of the car.
He was intoxicated, also had drugs in his system.
Underneath the body, police make another disturbing find.
Personal belongings of Miss Springer's that had been taken previously from her vehicle were found in his possession, as well as a weapon. A knife was found inside the vehicle with Mr. Simons Sr.
Investigators wonder if Rick Sr. planned to attack Kim Springer, but got disoriented and accidentally locked himself in the trunk due to the combination of drugs in his system and the extreme heat of the day.
Prior to Mr. Simons' death, he made comments to friends that he was going to give Kim Springer the surprise of her life.
We would theorize or speculate that Ricky Simons Sr. was there to cause Miss Springer harm.
The death of Rick Simons Sr. is a major setback to the investigation into what happened to Jamie.
I talked to Rick Sr. on the phone a couple of times, and the only thing that stuck out to me, and still to this day it sticks with me, is a conversation that we had, and he said he had been doing some searching himself, and he said, well, he said, maybe somebody's got her, just doesn't want to give her back. That has haunted me ever since.
Mr. Simons Sr.'s death closes out a source of information, and quite possibly a source who may have had the last contact with Jamie. And so his death does have a large impact on this investigation.
But tips from other sources keep coming in, and detectives are optimistic that one day they will find out what happened to Jamie.
We have searched with K9, with other investigative ground-penetrating devices, wooded areas around the property, across from the property, as well as miles away from the property. I think total we've searched probably 15, 16 square miles, if not more, in several different areas throughout the county. But we'll keep moving forward and work towards solving it and bring closure to it.
A copy of Jamie Fraley's active case file resides on my desk and stays on my desk, and so that I can see it daily. I do think we will find Jamie Fraley at some point.
It's difficult to gauge Rick Jr.'s reaction to his father's passing.
I don't believe that Ricky Jr. had a father-son relationship. His father was not around and did not really play a role in his growth.
So I did let him stay with us for a while. And he did good for a while. He went and got back on drugs and back down the same path.
For Jamie's mother, every day is a struggle.
Some people say, don't question God, but, I had a hard time bringing her into the world, Why would you take her from me? And I was supposed to be there to protect her. And I haven't got past that. It makes you feel like a bad mother. Wondering, well, when you go to eat, I think, well, I can't. Because what if she's not getting to eat? Or you go to sleep. Tell me I can't. What if she's not getting to sleep? Why should I have the right to eat or sleep?
Her family is committed to finding Jamie and bringing her home at any cost.
But at this point in time, I just want Jamie to come home. I hope that she's still alive. The odds are against us right now, but we can't give up hope. I'll never give up.
The police are meant to protect us from the worst of society. We trust them to uphold the law and keep us safe. But what happens when the protector becomes the predator?
He's performing as the protector of the public. On the other hand, he's actually a really dark monster.
Is that how you obtain this material?
And the people who are meant to keep us safe become dangerous.
I'm arrested on suspicion of attempted murder.
Even though you're a police officer, people will feel that they're above the law.
But how would you catch a criminal who thinks like a cop?
He's got a head start on the investigation team.
He's panicking at this point, and he's not running.
I've enlisted the help of 3 experts. 2 senior officers that have put hundreds of offenders behind bars.
Most people, they know when their back's against the wall and they're going to get convicted for something.
The horror, he's one of us.
And a leading psychologist who can analyse the criminal mind.
Underlying that anger is the need to dominate, is the need to control.
In this series, I'll discover cops who put themselves on the wrong side of the law.
He's like a Jekyll and Hyde character.
Abuse their power and commit horrific crimes.
We should never have had that badge. Ever.
We expect our police to behave with honesty and integrity. They're the ones we call on in a crisis. So what happens when a trusted police officer turns to lying and cheating and ultimately to murder? On the 9th of May 2020, in the small town of West Parley just outside Bournemouth, CCTV cameras at a local pub capture a man stumbling across the car park.
A 999 call comes in from a member of the public. They've come across a man who's very, very distressed, crying, shouting, with what appears like stab wounds on his arms.
He said he's been stabbed. We think there might be another casualty, and my husband's gone to have a look. We think there's another person who's black and blue apparently. We don't think she's with us.
Police and paramedic crews race to the scene.
When the officers turn up, it's a really confusing scene. They can see that the man who is shouting and distressed is somebody they know and they work with in force. They recognise him to be Timothy Bremer, a serving police officer. They can see behind him a short distance a vehicle with a female body slumped half in, half out of the car.
She's hanging out and she doesn't look like she's breathing.
This sunny Saturday afternoon has taken a sinister turn.
What makes this even more stressful and traumatic is the paramedics, when they turn up and start giving the person first aid, they recognise her as a colleague they work with in emergency services. It's a nurse called Parry.
Claire is in a critical condition. As paramedics try to stabilise her, PC Timothy Bremer's stab wounds are treated.
He starts confessing to everything that's happened leading up to this point.
I've written down what you said to me. What's been said, right? So when we first got here, when I first saw you outside, you were asked by the paramedics what was happening. You said wounds were caused by a penknife in my car. I've had it for years, don't remember what happened. just felt he'd go in, I think, 3 times.
I'm so sorry.
That's that's fine. We'll get you down to the hospital so we can get you all checked out, and then we can do it from there, alright?
Who stabbed PC Bremer? What happened to Claire Parry? And how did the police figure out what happened in that car park? To help me get to grips with this case, I'm speaking to former Detective Chief Superintendent Fiona Mallon.
The paramedics are doing everything they can to keep Claire alive. She gets taken to the Bournemouth General Hospital and they manage to restart her heart.
Claire is alive, but barely. The only one with any answers to what went on is Bremer. But his version of events only raises more questions. What did they know?
At this point in time, Bremer's really confused and he's changing his story every minute or so. One minute he's saying that Claire stabbed him with a penknife, then he's saying he might have done it himself. Now, you can look at this in 2 ways. Either Bremer's in shock, he can't work out what to say, or actually, he's thinking now that it's time to save himself and he needs to start blaming Claire for attacking him and he was defending himself.
Who thinks like that?
Yeah, that's fine, yeah. Get him in there.
We'll leave the questioning to you guys, we'll just medically look at it and don't put it away.
Yeah. As Claire clings to life, Bremer's police colleagues launch an urgent investigation.
We don't know the set of circumstances that has led up to what's happened between Timothy and Claire. All we know is that as an end result, Claire has been assaulted. What are these 2 people doing in this situation on a Saturday afternoon in a pub car park?
I'm so sorry.
That's alright.
On the 9th of May 2020, PC Timothy Bremer was found sitting in a pub car park with stab wounds to his arm. Behind him, nurse Claire Parry was found slumped in a car, barely alive. But is Bremer a victim or the attacker? So far, his version of events is the only thing police have got to go on.
And I've written down what you said here, what's been said, right?
It soon becomes clear Bremer and Claire were not strangers to one another.
I was having an affair with her, she got me to meet her here. Female arrived after me and jumped in my car. She was so angry, she was going to tell my wife we were having an affair for years. I think she told my wife I was going to drive off and kill myself.
Bremer's story is of a secret affair gone horrendously wrong. A jealous rage, threats of suicide, and his lover, Claire, left for dead. But who is Timothy Bremer? And how did this police officer end up on the wrong side of the law? What can you tell me about Timothy Bremer?
Bremer was 41 years old, serving with Dorset Police, married, and they had, on outward appearances, a normal, healthy relationship. He was well thought of in the force, did a number of roles.
What would Bremer's day-to-day be like as a police officer?
He moved from frontline duties into road traffic policing, obviously dealing with road traffic accidents, anything to do with sort of vehicle crime. And then he took on a specialist course called Family Liaison, which is a really sensitive role where you work with bereaved families or those who have lost people through homicides or other sort of road traffic accidents. He then got an accident, an altercation with a motorist one day, and it affected him quite badly in that he felt that he couldn't do his job and he was moved onto the National Police Service.
As a police officer and around his colleagues, how was he seen?
He was actually, in the early part of his career, regarded as a bit of a hero. Him and a colleague managed to save a family from a burning building and their 3 cats. Saved them all, saved their lives, phenomenal bravery. But from that he got enormous respect from his colleagues and management alike, and they thought he was a fantastic officer.
So how does this decorated police officer, a pillar of the community, end up being questioned by his colleagues, whilst his lover's life is hanging in the balance? To help me get to the truth, I need to speak to someone in the know. I'm just on my way to Dorset to meet somebody who's a journalist who knows a lot about this case and hopefully can fill in exactly what happened. Local journalist Ben Williards remembers covering this story.
Bremer was having an affair with Claire Parry. She was married herself and was nursed for quite a number of years and met Bremer in 2005. They then had a relationship which Bremer himself described as sexually flirtatious and infrequent, until 2010, 2011, where it became more frequent and very sexually orientated, where they continued on and off for 10 years.
Claire knew he was married. Was he leading Claire down the path of, I will leave my wife for you?
Initially, she didn't know he was married, and then when she found out, I think that was certainly an aspect of it, that they were going to leave their husbands and wives and run off into the sunset, so to speak.
Did either of their partners become aware that they were having an affair?
Claire's husband had his suspicions. He found emails from Claire to Bremer. He also found a rugby top under her bed, which didn't belong to him, just assumed that was Bremer's, and also bank statements from their joint account for travel lodges, and also a phone bill which had lots of calls and messages to the same number. So that really raised his suspicions.
Both Claire and Bremer were married, with young families. Getting the news she was in hospital fighting for her life, whilst he was in custody, accused of attempted murder, have come as a huge shock to their partners and families. Didn't any of Bremer's police colleagues know about the double life he was living?
There was also, in the background, murmurings and whispers around him being a bit of a charmer, flirt a lot with women, would look for women to talk to and sort of be a bit sexual in terms of flirtation. On one level, he's this really respected officer who saved people's lives. On another, he's a womanizer.
Womanizer or not, that doesn't explain what happened in the car park that day, or prove who was responsible. The investigators need evidence. To help me understand the challenge they faced, I'm speaking to ex-Met Detective Chief Inspector Howard Groves. When it comes to Bremer, because he has injuries, do you question them there and then about what's gone on?
The officers would want to establish what happened, so they would ask him basic questions. It wouldn't be a full-blown interview for obvious reasons, but they'd want to ask him how he received those injuries. Did he know who the person in the vehicle was? Whether the vehicle belonged to him. They would just want to establish the basic facts at the time. And those officers had body cameras on them. Initially, he said that he had been stabbed, so the officers obviously had to establish whether those facts were true.
The challenge for the investigators is to establish exactly what happened inside that car that left Claire with such terrible injuries. So far, the only person talking is Bremer.
Bremer's account of events is that he had met Claire in the car park. They were both in his vehicle. She was telling him that she was going to tell his wife about the affair that they were having. He obviously was not happy with that and wanted to do it himself. Claire then grabs his phone from him and sends a text to Bremer's wife, basically saying, I'm cheating. And as a result of that, he tried to get her out of the vehicle. She didn't want to do that, and he was trying to push her out. And that's when the injuries that she received happened.
Do they hold him responsible right away for what's happened to Claire?
The first thing the officers would be thinking about is whether or not the account that he provided on the basic information, whether that fits what they actually come across. Bearing in mind, Claire was actually unconscious. They couldn't ask her any questions.
She was so angry. She was going to tell my wife we were having an affair for years. She was going through my phone. I don't remember what happened. The wounds were caused by a penknife in my car.
Bremer is adamant that Claire was injured as he was trying to push her out of the passenger seat of his car. But that doesn't explain the wounds on his arm. So how did Bremer end up getting stabbed?
So he had his own penknife, which he kept in his car. And he stabbed himself. He claimed he was trying to get Claire's attention to stop her texting Bremer's wife. However, he went and sat at the front of the car park. He claimed that he was stabbed by Claire.
Let me just get this straight. So he's saying that he wanted to get Claire's attention away from texting his wife to let his wife know that he was cheating. So he stabbed himself and then went to the front of the road and told people that she'd stabbed him.
Yeah, absolutely, which again is a theme of his life. He's just lying all the way through.
I can't get my head around this. He's seen on the police body cameras saying he didn't know how he got the stab wounds. Then he's saying that Claire stabbed him. And then he did them to himself. Which is it?
Bremer's changing his story every minute or so. And I've watched the video footage of Bremer in the back of the ambulance, and also the walking about beforehand, the crying, the hand moving and everything else. He's trapped. He's got his colleagues there who recognise him. For me, this is a classic piece of theatre where he's trying to make himself look innocent. He's walking around sobbing and crying. I think he just looks pathetic.
Bremer is a well-trained copper and a serial liar. So is he just using his skill and experience to put on a performance? Because if he is, it's pretty convincing. But would Bremer's police colleagues believe what he's telling them? Is there any evidence to prove it? Or is it just another one of his lies?
The account provided by Bremer that he was just trying to push her out of the vehicle, the two don't marry up. Your initial thoughts to that explanation would be, that's definitely not the circumstances, but you, as a police officer, you know that there are going to be medical opportunities for you to be able to prove that injuries couldn't have been caused by somebody that's pushing someone out.
Rather than a tragic accident, there's a far darker explanation.
He was annoyed that Claire had used his phone to text his wife, and I think in a fit of pique, he decided that he was going to attack her because she was somebody who was now going to have an impact on his relationship with his wife. He would have probably not been able to see his son. So there's a lot going on in his head at the time of that attack.
The fact that Bremer is a police officer, when they arrive at the scene, does that change anything the way they treat him?
No, him being a police officer wouldn't really be an issue for the police officers. As far as they were concerned, here is somebody who has stab wounds or injuries to his hand. We know that there's a female in a car who's unconscious, so all they want to do is establish the facts.
What's happened? Who's injured? How's it happened?
Yes, once they identified Claire's details, it was established that she had a relationship with Bremer for at least 11 years, so there'd be an awful lot of information those officers would want to establish, either from him, his colleagues, his wife. Did his wife know about that relationship? Did any of his colleagues know about it?
The fast-paced investigation reaches an inevitable conclusion. That whatever happened to Claire in the car, Bremer was responsible, either directly or indirectly.
She said she's going to get arrested. At the moment, I'm arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. You don't have to say anything, but it may I mention my question, something there at Ryan Call. Anything you do say may be given evidence, okay?
I'm so sorry.
What they don't know is why Claire chose that moment to confront Bremer and expose their affair to his wife. She had known he had a wife for over a decade. So why now?
There was rumours these gathered pace, and Claire Parry started to get suspicious. She thought she was the other woman, but actually, there were many, many more.
May 2020, and Police Constable Timothy Bremer of Dorset Police has been arrested for the attempted murder of his lover, Claire Parry. Their decade-long affair had ended up with a brutal and violent attack, leaving Claire fighting for her life. But as Bremer's police colleagues dig into his personal life, they discover a tipping point in the pair's relationship.
So, Bremer and Claire had been having an on-off relationship for sort of 10, 11 years. And in the latter part, Claire had become suspicious that he was one of many women and that he was cheating on her as well as his wife in her mind. So she sets up a fake Facebook account and she starts to do her own inquiry around what women Bremer's been in touch with, who he's going out with, what photos are available. And she comes to the conclusion he's a serial womanizer and she feels cheated.
So Claire wasn't the only woman Bremer was seeing. He was even cheating on his mistress with multiple women. How did Claire react when she found out that she wasn't the only one?
This is where Claire became incredibly angry and she felt that she'd been cheated and lied to and deceived. And all the time I think she was given false promises by Bremer saying, you know, I love you, I can't leave, I love you, I've got family or whatever. So she stayed, but also during this time her own marriage broke up, which was really sad. So she's now left with the realisation that the man she'd been with and spending time with was actually cheating on her. What did she have left? And then she became angry and she wanted to get her own back. She wanted to destroy Bremer's home life too.
What did she do?
She contacted Bremer. Bremer's with his family in the garden and he makes an excuse to his wife that he's going to go out and get some food for the barbecue. But actually, he's arranged to meet with Claire. I think Bremer still thinks he can get his own way, he can influence her. Everything's right, don't worry, you're the one for me. But Claire's not having it. And Claire sends a text to his wife about cheating, at which point the tension between them escalates, and then Bremer attacks Claire.
Bremer is a pathological liar. He's been caught out, and he doesn't like it.
For years, he's managed a double life. He's been with his wife, who didn't suspect. his family and playing their respected police officer. So he's playing this big sort of chessboard and everything's nice and controlled, and suddenly he's going to come crashing down because Claire's had enough and she wants to expose him to his wife and ruin his marriage.
Bremer flipped and brutally attacked Claire, causing her to lose consciousness, before lying about what happened to the witnesses at the scene, the police and the paramedics.
When he leaves the car and he starts talking about it, he delays getting any medical help to her. So in those vital minutes when he's flailing about talking about himself, actually they could have had immediate care to Claire.
Tragically, Claire never regains consciousness and dies the following day. In your mind, did you think he actually intended to kill her?
I think he did, yeah.
Bremer was a police officer, someone trusted and respected. And yet he was capable of doing something so terrible to someone he said he loved. Just what was going on in his mind? To help me understand, I'm speaking to chartered psychologist Serena Simmons.
I think ultimately for me, when you look at Bremer's presentation, what I see is someone who cannot regulate his emotions and has no control over sense of self. And how he exhibits that is in his inability to stay faithful to his partner and his inability to monitor and regulate his own emotions. He's a compulsive liar. He's used to having multiple affairs and being with multiple women. So you imagine what that's like in reality. You'll have to tell a lot of stories to a lot of different people. And be able to keep the narrative going with kind of several different people at the same time takes a lot of effort. So any sign of that house of cards coming down is going to feel even more threatening.
For a rational person would be like, I couldn't deal with the stress of it all. Whereas for him, he probably enjoyed the control of all that, having all these puppets at the end of the strings.
There's obviously something about this lifestyle that he got a lot out of. I think it served him and it served a purpose for him. But obviously it became more complicated when there was the threat to this all being taken away from him and something that was happening out of his control, and he wanted to regain that control back.
It was only a matter of time before all Bremer's deception caught up with him. But no one could have anticipated it catching up in such a vicious and tragic way. How was Bremer seen by his peers, work colleagues?
The fact that he was a serial adulterer was very well known to people that worked alongside him. In actual fact, it was so well known that people chose to call him various different nicknames. For example, Mr. Smooth. These are very telling signs that people knew exactly what his character was really like.
I mean, it does what it says on the tin. It's obvious the kind of person he is. Reputation is one thing, but if the investigators were going to prove that Bremer was lying, they need hard evidence.
A lot of analysis would be done in the vehicle. It would have been fingerprinted. Even though we know that both of them were in there, they would have considered that. They would have looked at the seat belts. They would look at what position somebody would have to be to receive the injuries. He said he was almost on top of her as he was trying to get her out.
And as they dig deeper, the evidence against Bremer begins to mount.
The mobile phones of both parties would be significant because it would have shown earlier on in the day when Bremer had finished work. He actually rang Claire in the early hours of the morning. There's a conversation between them. Later on, Claire rings him and says, I want to have a chat with you. They agree where they're going to meet, so that all that timeline would be relevant to the investigation. We know from the autopsy, it showed that she had actually received a significant blow to her mouth, which caused abrasions and lacerations inside her mouth. A small bone in her neck was also broken. She had at least 11 bruises to her right upper arm. She had a further 10 bruises and abrasions on her left arm, and she had significant bruising in the area of her chest. When you think about all of those injuries, it meant that significant force was used against her.
Obviously, it sounds like he strangled her or he's choked her.
Yes.
But with all the other bruises and injuries in that such a small space in a car, it sounds like he's completely lost it.
And we know that Claire also put up a fight as well, but they obviously had her in a restrained hold for long enough for her to be unconscious. She fought as hard as she could, but bearing in mind he is a police officer, he would know how to restrain someone, and he would know what amount of force to use.
So how long do we think he probably strangled her for?
Between 10 to 30 seconds of continual pressure.
The fact that Bremer choked Claire for that long and caused so many injuries to her body tells me all I need to know about this cop. But evidence of what happened after the attack would prove just as important.
The most telling bit of evidence that they had was based on a text message that was sent from Bremer's phone to his wife. It was Claire who sent that message at 15:02 to his wife. And we know that 3 minutes after that, he then tries to wipe the data from his phone. So minutes after the attack, Bremer is trying to reset his mobile phone.
In the midst of everything, in all that emotional distress, Bremer still thought to reset his phone.
The mere fact that he's doing a factory reset shows that there's an intent on his part to hide something from the investigators. So even though he's distressed about it, as you can see from the footage, he still had the mindset to try and minimize any evidence that the police officers would subsequently be looking to find.
This is truly despicable. Someone who is supposed to be trustworthy and honest is not only telling lie after lie, but he's actively trying to destroy evidence and cover his tracks. Does he really think he's going to get away with murder?
So Bremer would have known. He's an experienced police officer. He knows what he's doing. He will know that the offences that the police are going to look at him for, the assault, he knows that he's got to show some sort of loss of control, diminished responsibility, confused state, help him get out of this situation. And that's what it feels like he's doing.
It's cold and calculating, and gives a glimpse of the real Timothy Bremer. But how did his true nature go under the radar with his colleagues in the police? Especially when some of those women he was cheating with were fellow officers themselves.
Dorset is a relatively small force, 1,500 people, very tight-knit, close. Everyone would have known each other's business. Everyone would have been talking. But if you juxtapose that against the fact that he's a really respected officer who has been recognised for bravery and for saving lives, perhaps people thought, well, if he's having affairs, that's down to him, it's his private life. It's not causing anyone harm as far as they could see. And he's a really well thought of officer. So perhaps that in itself was enough just to let it go.
It wasn't causing anyone harm until Bremer did what he did to Claire.
There was no significant red flags about his ability to be a professional police officer, but there were comments raised about him being a womanizer from an early stage of his career. So one could say, was any action taken? Did any officer make any complaints against him? Put it bluntly, it doesn't show a good character if someone is having extramarital affairs, but it's not a sackable offence.
He is a police officer, we have to remember that. But he's also a very, very good liar, a manipulator. Is that someone you want to have in the force?
No, of course not. You don't want dishonest people. You want people with integrity and ethics and people who know the difference between right and wrong. He was a serial liar. He lived in a fantasy world. He thought he was irresistible to women. And he thought that he could have any woman he wanted. And it didn't matter that he wouldn't be found out.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
He was very clever in how he managed his time and how he manipulated others around him. So not only was he lying to his wife and to Claire, but also he was manipulating and lying to sort of supervising officers around him so that he could work his shifts, so he'd go and see the women he wanted to see. So he was very clever in how he, again, was puppeteering all the time, controlling everybody.
I just can't get Bremer's wife out of my mind. She's just found out her hero husband has been cheating on her for 10 years. It's likely police colleagues knew, but said nothing. And now he's in custody, and his lover is dead.
I'm sure there are many of those colleagues who will be asking themselves the question, why didn't we say something about it? Why didn't we approach him and say, everybody knows what you're doing, maybe you want to stop? Or even to the women he was having those relationships with, who were police officers, really? We now know that Claire didn't have any idea about it. She was able to hide and live this double life.
This horrific attack was carried out by a police officer. Someone who is supposed to protect people and keep them safe, not lie and deceive, and ultimately to kill. And when the chips were down, he never thought about Claire, only what he needed to do to protect himself.
In that moment, what's fascinating is that he stepped into victim mode. So instead of doing what would be right thing in that situation, aside from not having done it in the first place, but to call an ambulance to get help for her. No, he switches into victim. Poor me. It's all about him and poor him. And I think that's just very illustrative of the fact that he slipped into that little boy, that very insecure little boy who wants attention and needs to have his needs met first. It's taking complete attention off the person that really is requiring that at that time.
She was going through my phone. I don't remember what happened.
That's quite cold, isn't it? Straight away you're thinking about, right, how do I protect myself in this situation?
Yeah, he is. But this is typical of the person who's managed so many people's lives and controlled them, and done it clinically, and clearly for a number of years.
PC Timothy Bremer had admitted on arrest on the 9th of May 2020 that there was a struggle in his car that led to the death of nurse Claire Parry. Can you remember what the response was like from the community when they heard a local police officer had done this?
Yeah, just shock, I think, especially for a respected officer. Nobody knew what he was like outside of his police work. Nobody knew his dealings with women, so they thought he was quite a well-respected man. I'm just really surprised and disappointed as well in the force and in Bremer himself.
Bremer met with Claire in this pub car park in Dorset. While they were in his car, she used his phone to text his wife, revealing their affair. He claimed she was then accidentally injured in a kerfuffle as he tried to push her out of the car so he could drive away.
Despite Bremer's claims it was an accident, investigators have uncovered evidence that Claire was deliberately killed. But without irrefutable proof or eyewitnesses, there's still some doubt as to exactly what happened. Why couldn't we see on CCTV what happened in that car?
So where they parked, where we're stood now, CCTV doesn't cover this area, so the only things we can see is the two of them driving in from the entrance, and then 20 minutes later, Bremer walking to the front and sitting down on the pavement just outside.
But then that makes me think, is Bremer using his police knowledge to know that this area of the car park isn't on CCTV?
Whether is that calculated, I don't know, but he certainly would know that there are areas where CCTV doesn't cover.
And were there other ways in which Bremer used the skills he'd learned as a cop to cover his tracks?
He tries to wipe his phone at an early stage. The method that he's used to restrain her, and he was thinking ahead of the game. You know, he gets out of the vehicle, he then to give the impression that he's been attacked. So he's giving a story, although when you think about it long term, that story wouldn't hold for too long. It's his police knowledge, it's his police experience. He knows he's going to be asked questions, so he has to come up with an answer.
Despite his deception and destruction of crucial evidence, Bremer is arrested and charged with Claire's murder. But at his pre-trial hearing, the police officer pleads not guilty.
So Bremer pleaded guilty to manslaughter. He admitted killing Claire Parry, but denied meaning to. His story was always that he was trying to get her out of the car and accidentally killed her in the kerfuffle. Dorset Police and the CPS, working together, decided there was enough evidence to try him for murder, which he denied, so that was when the trial came in.
Despite admitting killing Claire, Bremer made a story that it was unintentional. I just don't buy it, and neither did the police or the CPS. Bremer appeared at Salisbury Crown Court in October 2020, facing a murder charge. Local journalist Ben reported on it.
It was during COVID, so we weren't able to actually be in court in person, so I had to watch it via live link, which made it difficult because we couldn't see Bremer's reactions to other witnesses giving their statements.
Did he say anything in court?
So in his defence, Bremer actually gave evidence in court, and he came across as very eccentric, I thought. He described his affair with Claire as a bubble of niceness. He said when he was with Claire, he was suspended in the best state of himself, and he said his relationship with her was eccentric personality with the images you see of him. And actually when I saw his custody photo, where he looked really rugged, it really did take me back about how different he was in court. He claimed that he didn't mean to kill her, and he was trying to get her out of his car so he can go off and kill himself. The prosecution put it to him that, as a trained police officer in the road traffic unit as well, used to dealing with serious incidents, he would have known what it would take to actually kill someone by strangling them in the crook of his arm.
This guy has proven himself to be a serial liar and a cheat. Why would anyone believe him now?
My reading is that he's cold, he knows what he is doing, and he is playing the audience, and he's playing to the people who know him at work. He's hoping they'll have pity on him, they'll like him, they'll side with him, and he's doing everything he can to encourage their favour.
Shockingly, the tactic works.
Bremer had previously admitted manslaughter and less than 3 hours, the jury at Salisbury Crown Court agreed he was not guilty of murder.
The jury would have had to be sure, beyond reasonable doubt, that he did mean to kill her. The CCTV and the horns in, you can't see what happened in the car, so you've only got their version of events. But he was then sentenced on the basis that he lost control, which is a partial defence to murder. So the judge said there was the qualifying trigger, which was the message sent to his wife, and he said that that message should have come from Tim. So a man of a similar build and age would have also lost control, and in losing control, took Claire by the neck and killed her.
Not guilty after all of that. So what happens is then he accepts the manslaughter charge and he gets convicted for and sentenced for 10.5 years, which is later appealed as being too lenient, and he ends up getting 13.5 years imprisonment.
It must have been a bitter blow for the investigators that had so painstakingly built the case against Bremer. But for Claire's family, who had been hoping to see justice done, it must have been devastating. Could you just explain the difference between manslaughter and murder?
Well, murder is premeditated. You've planned it. You set out to kill someone, and you take those necessary steps. Manslaughter, you could say it's an accident. Or, I intended to assault them, but I didn't intend to kill them.
But he had a chance to stop, and he didn't. So in that point, when he didn't stop, doesn't that become murder then?
The nuances of murder and manslaughter are apparent, but during the trial, the judge actually made comment and say that he felt that the defense had actually met the standards for loss of control, and therefore manslaughter was the appropriate conviction.
It just doesn't seem enough. If that was my daughter at the back of that car that he killed, 13.5 years doesn't seem nowhere near enough.
As an ex-police officer, I can understand the sentencing guidelines and why they arrived at that decision. The father, I don't think that 13.5 years is sufficient. You have to take into account the time that he had already served when he was on remand. He's going to get at least a third of that sentence knocked off again. So within 8 years, he will be a free man again to go out and build relationships with other people. Claire's family will still be grieving over her loss. So sometimes you can say that justice doesn't seem to be fair.
PC Timothy Bremer violently attacked and ultimately killed Claire because she exposed him for who he really was. Do you think Bremer would be thinking to himself, I just got away with murder?
The fact is he did get away with it, didn't he? He's got 13.5 years. His marriage is over, and obviously his family's torn apart.
He'll still be able to live his life, won't he? He'll still have a life.
Yes. Claire hasn't, no.
There wasn't just one victim here. Although they'd separated, Claire had a husband, a family, and friends. I can't imagine what they must have been through.
Bremer has lost everything. He's lost his freedom, he's lost his career, he's lost having time to be with his family, his children and his loved ones. Really, as a result of what he's done, he's literally lost everything.
Do you think there was any remorse from Bremer?
I think he may have felt remorse that she had gone. He'd been with her for 11 years. I think more the remorse would be centred around the fact that this lifestyle, this house of cards that he had very carefully built over so many years had now fallen. Because he liked the lifestyle that he had. I think he liked the character that he could portray. And so any remorse, any true remorse would really come from losing everything, not just having killed Claire. Having worked in institutions myself and dealt with people who have committed murder, it's not unusual for people who've committed such an act to have to work through their own emotions around what they've done. Believe it or not, some people find it also quite traumatic that they've done these things, and so they have to think about and process this awful thing that they've done. I think there are signs here with Bremer that he might have to do some of that psychological work himself.
What's your opinion of Bremer?
I think he's despicable. He's everything I hate in a person, in that he's a liar, he's a cheater, he's weak, he's narcissistic, and he's looking after himself the whole time. And to then put a uniform on and say he's about public service is an insult to policing and to everybody he loves around him, or who loves him.
As a cop, Bremer was in a position of trust and responsibility, and he abused that. He lied, he cheated and manipulated people, and when that sense of control was lost, he turned to murder. In my opinion, never fit to wear that uniform.
They spotted a trend in increasing frequency of cardiac emergencies.
She put her own needs for attention, her own needs for excitement in front of other people.
But it was even more exciting when her boyfriend was there as well.
She would flirt with him in the midst of a CPR.
And one time she straddled a patient and her garter belt could be seen, and she turned it into almost like a sexual experience in some sense.
These things are happening in a life-threatening situation.
This soccer mom potentially murdered her patients.
And that's why they called her the Angel of Death?
Northampton is a beautiful, beautiful small town in the Berkshires. Sort of reminds me of the Hamptons on Long Island, without the beaches, only in the mountains.
It was a sleepy, bucolic, slow-paced hospital. People, tend to know their patients' families and things like that. It's close-knit.
VA medical centers are providing medical care to veterans. It's a general medical service, treating primarily patients that are older, although that demographic has changed a little bit due to various wars and that sort of thing.
The VA itself was primarily responsible for medical problems. They did also have some people with kind of co-occurring psychiatric and medical problems.
It really helped veterans who were down on their luck, battling perhaps diseases or alcoholism or some of the things that veterans have to deal with, post-service.
A patient goes into cardiac arrest. Then all of a sudden, all the bells and whistles start ringing and people come running in.
He flatlines and efforts to revive him are unsuccessful and he dies. He seemed to be pretty stable, was there for over a month. And so it was really a surprise to the nursing staff as well as his family.
Mr. Jadowski was admitted status post, what we call above knee amputation, but he was improving. His condition was getting generally better and looking forward to a successful discharge.
Stanley Jagodowski had diabetes, but none of these conditions are conditions that when you go in the hospital, you would expect not to come out because you had a cardiac arrest. This is an example of a patient that coded unexpectedly.
Henry Houdon was a young patient who was largely in the VA Medical Center for his psychiatric condition.
He was an Air Force pilot who had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, secondary to breaking up a bar fight several years ago and having a head injury.
He had some mental emotional problems as a result of that, and sometimes he would just lose it and go off.
He came in saying he had flu symptoms, but he really had no serious medical problems. He was a 35-year-old person with a severe mental illness that was pretty healthy physically. Shortly after his admission, where he is being monitored, his vitals are being monitored, and so it seems as if everything is going really, really well.
Code Blue is terminology used in the hospital to signal that there's a cardiac arrest. Immediately people would respond.
He has, in one evening, 4 codes, and after numerous resuscitations on the 4th code, they are unable to revive him.
He was pronounced dead.
They were in the acute medical ward for non-cardiac conditions, and therefore a cardiac event that ended their life was extremely unusual.
Les Gilbert was a registered nurse who was described as being good at providing patient care, particularly in a crisis.
Among her talents, and the ones that they specifically talked about, was her ability to identify patients who were in or were about to go into an acute medical situation. It was uncanny the way she was able to identify patients in distress before anyone else had noticed anything wrong with that particular patient.
Kristen Gilbert would take charge. She would start barking orders to the young interns who were scared out of their mind. They didn't know what to do. In fact, the staff would say, you know, if I ever coded, I would want Kristen Gilbert to be there. She takes charge.
Kristen Gilbert was considered by her coworkers to be caring, a nice person, someone who would participate in coworker activities like birthday cakes and things like that. But all of them always talked about this sort of coldness that always sort of followed her wherever she went.
Some people on Ward C were noticing that Kristen seemed to be calling in most of the codes. And they began kind of teasing her and calling her the angel of death.
The reason they called her that is because she was able to find and then assist patients who were in distress in medical emergencies quickly.
It was really seen, I think, for the most part, as just bad luck. But there was a couple of nurses who were starting to become a little bit concerned.
Stanley Jadowski was on oral medication. That was all that he was receiving at the time.
Kristen Gilbert was observed going into his room and giving him an injection, which he really protested, when that happened.
He cried out, it burns, you're killing me." And as other nurses looked down the hall, they could see Kristen Gilbert running out of his room, almost skidding on the sandals as she was rounding the corner to get out of his room.
Within hours, he was dead. He died of cardiac arrest. Kenneth Cutting was admitted with end-stage or late-stage multiple sclerosis, which is basically a debilitating muscular disease.
He was blind. And yet, one of the things that the staff and his family said is this was such a positive person. He was kind of known for telling the nurses, "You look so beautiful today." Even though he couldn't see, he would always say that to them. And so he was really kind of a bright light in spite of all the things that he was experiencing. One night, Kristen is very eager to get off work so she can essentially meet a date. The problem is that Kenneth Cutting is the only patient who is in ICU. And Kristen cannot leave as long as he's there. She's responsible for him. She even goes to the head nurse and asks if she can leave, and he says no. And at this point, she asks him, if Kenneth dies, can I leave early? And he says yes. Shortly after that, Kristen calls a code.
He had cardiac arrest.
He dies.
That was one of the main precipitating events that really got some people to become quite suspicious about what was going on.
That's a pretty brazen thing to do. And so what that implies is that this is a situation where Kristen Gilbert is willing to murder a patient in order to go on a date.
After a period of time, several of the most senior registered nurses came together and began to talk about the highly unusual behavior, conduct that Kristen Gilbert had been engaging in.
It seems like every time Kristen Gilbert is on duty, the death rate goes up. Nurse Kristen Gilbert takes a few days off, the death rate goes down.
The senior nurses at first, I think, had to overcome what I would call a very natural hurdle within the medical environment, which is you just don't think that one of your own, someone who's trained to be a registered nurse or a doctor, would ever engage in conduct that would harm your patient. And I think once they got past that psychological hurdle, then they began to put the pieces together.
Some of the nurses go to the supervisor and then finally file a formal complaint.
The purpose of the Office of Healthcare Inspection is to do as the name implies, go to hospitals and do inspections and make sure that everything's all right. This group consists of mostly nurses and maybe a physician, not trained in forensics, not trained to look for murder, but trained to find legitimate reasons why something went wrong.
Some of the nurses were noticing that Ward C was going through an inordinate amount of epinephrine.
Epinephrine is a naturally occurring substance in our body. We call it the flight or fight drug. It is that rush of adrenaline that you get in certain situations.
Epinephrine has many important uses. Some people take them for bee stings, all right? It can actually save lives. But if it's administered to someone who doesn't need it in a dose that's too excessive, it will actually speed up the heart. And then eventually the person goes into cardiac arrest and expires.
It was the perfect poison because it was naturally producing and therefore very difficult to detect.
Epinephrine, unlike other drugs, is not locked up the same way in the hospital.
And so epinephrine is not a controlled substance. It's not a narcotic that you have to sign for. You can just walk in the nursing station and take it.
These very brave and courageous nurses discovered a lot of epinephrine that was missing, that was unaccounted for. They actually saw Kristen walking around with an EpiPen, and they came to the conclusion that as hard as it was for them even to fathom such a thing, that one of their co-workers was intentionally putting patients into a code, and that individual was Kristen Gilbert.
Kristen Gilbert grew up in Fall River, Massachusetts.
A very popular, attractive young lady in high school, but she had some problems. You know, she had some issues, always seeking attention, sometimes getting in fights with boyfriends, and had a number of social issues growing up.
Socially, it was kind of a mixed bag.
She was a very manipulative, attention-seeking individual. There were false suicide attempts. She, at one point, apparently loosened the lug nuts of an ex-boyfriend's vehicle out of revenge for the breakup of the relationship.
She was accused of sometimes starting fires. She was accused of damaging property when things didn't go her way. So if you didn't give Kristen Gilbert all the attention she wanted, she would get very angry and she would turn on you.
College, she had actually attacked at least one of her ex-boyfriends and raped him with her fingernails. At one point in time, she had told a college boyfriend that she had swallowed a bunch of glass and was going to kill herself, and it was a lie. And he became so concerned by her threats, her repeated harassment of him, her physical actions toward him, that he actually went to her college at the time and told them, I think this person is so unstable that if she doesn't get some psychiatric help, she might kill somebody.
Initially, she worked at a large regional hospital in Massachusetts. And what was very, very striking is the rate of deaths on her shift were disproportionately higher than for any other shift. And that pattern followed her when she went to the VA Medical Center.
She began noticing and flirting with the security guard, James Perrault.
And what started out as a simple kiss became a more complicated affair.
It was really when Kristen Gilbert moved to the evening shift and when she began this affair with James Perrault that the warning bells really went off. Because at that point, there was a combination of, one, a really sharp increase in the number of medical emergencies and codes, combined with bizarre behavior that she engaged in during the course of codes or CPR events.
When a code is called, it was part of the kind of protocol for the security officer to also respond to the scene.
Kristen Gilbert would usually sound the alarm. She would come running in, and so would James Perrault, her lover at the time. And not only was she showing off to James Perrault her skills, but witnesses say one time she straddled a patient and her dress went up and her garter belt could be seen and he was there. So she turned it into quite an experience for herself, almost like a sexual experience in some sense.
One of the nurses recalls her talking about, oh, what strong muscles James has as he's attempting to help with the CPR. And, you know, these are things that are happening in a life-threatening situation when the entire focus should be on saving the person who's in distress.
They performed their review more from a quality control perspective as opposed to really trying to find out the root cause. Their conclusion was that these patients must have died of natural causes.
When I heard that, I said, I think maybe we should take another look. And I had a number of investigators that were really well skilled in extracting from the nurses their gut feelings. So I said, I have to send a team out there. I just have to do it. I'm not comfortable. I am not comfortable with what I'm reading. I want to be comfortable myself. So I sent the team out to the hospital. Eddie Square had an alcoholism problem.
Mr. Scara had been there on numerous occasions and had developed, on this particular admission, developed a medical condition that required him to be transferred to another facility for treatment. He was out of the facility for a few days and then returned back to the VA Medical Center. And shortly after his return, he had a cardiac arrest and died.
At the conclusion of that medical emergency, broken epinephrine ampules were found in the waste disposal bucket. There was no reason for epinephrine ampules to be found broken in waste disposal buckets. And so therefore, if there are ampules being found that are broken and they are being found shortly after cardiac events, then that suggested more than probable cause to believe that there was something criminal going on. And in close proximity, not only to the victim, but also to Kristen Gilbert. So in essence, we were able to put the murder weapon in her hand.
My investigative team came back to me and they were convinced that Kristen Gilbert was intentionally murdering patients.
The pattern of the codes and medical emergencies during this, what I will call 7 or 8 month window from August through February 1996 was exceedingly high. There were approximately 60, to the best of my memory, that occurred during this time frame.
They said, Bruce, we have a real case here, and we have to start a real criminal investigation. So we put together a team working with the United States Attorney's Office and working with the Massachusetts State Police, and we rolled up our sleeves and began the investigation.
We had to interview the senior nurses to assess their credibility, to understand exactly what they saw and what they heard, because that would be crucial if we ever had to go to trial.
They had told us how she was the last nurse that they saw with some of the patients, how she could be so cold and calculating after a patient had expired. It's like a Jekyll and Hyde. Yes, she was very popular until something happened that triggered the other side of her, the dark side of her. And then she could be extremely dangerous.
Kristen Gilbert's behavior during the investigation initially began with what I would call the victim mentality. But then it quickly shifted, and she became much more aggressive, not only in terms of attacking her coworkers, not physically, but mentally, kind of attacking them.
She would call them up. She wanted to know what the investigators were asking. She also would try to plant these false seeds of memory on them.
They asked Kristen Gilbert whether or not she did it. And of course, she denied it. But most importantly, she denied that she at any point had been using epinephrine ampules with respect to any patient. She admitted that she was taking care of Edward Squira right before his cardiac event. But as the evidence showed, it was within minutes of that code terminating that a senior registered nurse found the 3 broken ampules in the waste disposal bucket. So therefore, the answers that she had given during the interview proved to be false.
house. I was there myself at that time. And Kristen Gilbert answers the door. She was cold as ice. We went in the house and we conducted a search.
One piece of evidence that we found was a book on medicines or medications, and the page for epinephrine had been dog-eared, so the corner of it had been bent down for what appeared to be ready reference. She knew that we were close to assembling a case against her, and I believe that at a critical moment, she cracked under pressure.
Kristen attempts suicide, takes a handful of pills, and is admitted to a psychiatric hospital. And it's while she's in this facility that she ends up calling James Perrault.
She said to James Perrault, I did it, you wanted to know, I did it. And to me, that was the first time that we saw any glimmer of empathy, any glimmer of emotion in her, but that was only because she realized she was about to be caught, that she was not smarter than we were.
She becomes enraged. She becomes very destructive. She does a lot of things to his car. You know, she lets the air out of one of the tires. She ends up scraping the side of it and damaging it. She is very, very invested in paying him back. James Perrault receives a bomb threat, a phone call, essentially saying that there are 3 bombs at the hospital and that they are going to detonate in 2 hours.
The voice on the bomb threats was actually electronically altered so that the voice could not be recognized.
It required them to move all of these patients who are on Ward C.
They actually required the ICU to be evacuated, which was a heck of a job, and actually put a number of patients in a problem situation. So it was a terrible, terrible thing.
We discovered that Kristen Gilbert was behind the bomb threats because one of the investigators saw her on the payphone just as a bomb threat was being called into Ward C. She was trying to kill this investigation through retaliation. The staff became quite concerned about their own personal safety and our ability to protect them from anything else that Kristen Gilbert may have wanted to do. We discovered the device that was able to render her voice unrecognizable.
A device called Talk Girl and Talk Boy. It's like a doll. When you talk into it, it repeats what you say in a different voice. So she did that, and that's how she phoned in the bomb threats.
The reason she did this was because she was retaliating against those witnesses that she believed were providing information to investigators. And I think she was trying to persuade them not to talk to us anymore.
She was arrested for the bomb threat, and she was actually incarcerated.
She made her appearance in court, and the judge ordered her to live with her parents, which meant she was out of the vicinity of the VA Medical Center. And then ultimately, he gave her an 18-month prison sentence.
That put her out of the picture, and that gave us a wonderful opportunity to further our investigation.
Her ex-husband, Glenn Gilbert, essentially tells them that he believes that his ex-wife tried to kill him at one point.
One day, he wasn't feeling well, and his wife said, well, I'll take care of you.
And she recommended to him that she draw some blood. In very emotional, in a very detailed way, Glenn described to us how within their bathroom, he took a seat on the toilet and he watched his wife draw out of a vial a clear substance. And Glenn Gilbert couldn't understand why she was drawing a substance into a syringe.
He says, well, what are you doing? She says, well, I have to flush a line before I take some blood from you.
He then described how Kristen Gilbert injected this clear substance into a vein in his arm, and then there was this initial burning sensation where the needle went into his vein, and then he felt this ice-cold feeling travel up his arm, hit his chest, and the last thing he knew is that he then blacked out.
He comes to and he sees Kristen shoving all of her medical equipment back into her bag. She looks at him, she sees him, and she basically leaves him lying on the floor in the bathroom and goes back to work.
He realized sometime later that that was her first attempt to kill her own husband.
When we heard that story, there was no doubt in our mind that Kristen Gilbert had been murdering patients up on Ward C at the VA Medical Center.
And so investigators are meeting with some of the families, and they ask them, can we exhume your loved one's body to see if there is foul play?
For the most part, the families were really, after the initial shock, and who wouldn't be shocked, very nice and very cooperative. My agents were very respectful for the families. Sometimes they actually wanted to attend the exhumation. And my agents would bring flowers to the cemetery, and they would watch as the backhoe would come and dig up the ground, and the coffin would be removed. Many times it was soaking wet. Water would just come out of the coffin, and they would put the coffin on the side, and it was quite the process to witness. Samples were taken, and we sent the samples to the Reader's Lab in Pennsylvania. Well, the question is, can you find traces of epinephrine in embalmed tissue? And at that time, Dr. Reeders said yes. You see, we have this brand new machine. It's called the High Performance Liquid Chromatography Tandem Mass Spectrometer. We run it through all this tests, and it came out and said epinephrine. Wow. Not only did we have that, but then we also went to a physician who was expert on this, and he looked at everything and he said, yes, the deaths are consistent with epinephrine poisoning. And there was no reason for any of these patients to be administered epinephrine to begin with.
They wouldn't specifically be looking for one thing, but they would be looking to rule out, okay, it wasn't heart, it wasn't lungs, it wasn't a stroke, it wasn't, an aneurysm, and that they would be trying to rule out all those other factors. Sherlock Holmes says, when you rule out all the other things, what you're left with is what happened.
We had a world-renowned forensic examiner, Dr. Michael Bodden, who performed the autopsies. He was able to carefully go through each one of the vital systems of these victims and was able to exclude any natural causes as a contributing factor to their deaths. And he was able to opine, based on all the evidence that we gathered from the investigation, that epinephrine was the most likely poison to have caused these murders.
Number one, they find epinephrine in his system, which he certainly was not prescribed. The other thing they find, though, which was really a shock to them, was ketamine. And ketamine is a tranquilizer that's often used in veterinary clinics, although it can also be used in surgery. The bottom line being that neither one of those substances should have been in Ed Scalera's blood.
In a small town like Northampton, Massachusetts, this was clearly the trial of the century, maybe the biggest trial ever. All of a sudden, one of their own is accused of murdering the nation's heroes right there in their little town.
We did have some concern that Kristen Gilbert presented herself as the perfect soccer mom. And would a jury be able to get behind that mask? And I think the public was split on whether or not she actually did do it. But the other layer of controversy that was added to this difficult case was the U.S. attorney at the time decided that he was going to pursue the death penalty. And this was the first time that the District of Massachusetts was pursuing the death penalty in a federal capital case.
It was a media frenzy. From the first day the trial started, that was a big story. And every day when Kristen Gilbert would show up in court, the first thing she wanted was a copy of the newspaper because she wanted to read about herself. She wanted to read about all the attention she was getting. And I said a little prayer every night that she would actually be convicted. So I had a lot riding on it personally.
The jury returned 1 second-degree murder conviction, 3 first-degree murder convictions, and 2 attempted murder convictions. It was a tremendous feeling of relief because we had done justice for the families and for the victims.
After the sentence was pronounced, I looked over at Kristen Gilbert, I'm sure everyone else did, and I recall her just staring straight ahead in that very cold, icy stare that she had.
There was no emotion, there was no observable physical change in her whatsoever.
Kristen Gilbert has never expressed any remorse and never will express any. It's all about what the excitement of the code gave her. That's all that she cared about, getting attention. She couldn't care less about victims. To me, this is the most evil person that I could think of. There were news reports that there was at least 30 possible victims of Kristen Gilbert. Is it possible? Yes, it is possible. But in any investigation, you have to zero in on the very best cases.
She believed that she could get away with this and not get caught. And ultimately, we proved her wrong.